Good afternoon. This is Grant Price with the Noontime News, presented today by Waterloo Bills.
Grant was really passionate about people and would do what he could to help people in need. And I think that was at the root of his journalism, too, is that he felt that journalism had a responsibility to help people.
Good evening and welcome to Broadcasting and You. We're here to...
He didn't waver from his values and his integrity, and I think people are drawn to that, especially in the industry he was in.
Violent, whirling wind, especially in the central part of the United States.
He opened the way. He did new and innovative things. He was always on the cutting edge.
I still think I'm walking around with many of Grant's standards embedded in my heart and mind.
He was born in Saskatchewan, Canada. My grandfather had worked with the railroad, and Grandpa Price had an opportunity to become a foreman of a cattle ranch down in Nebraska. So the family moved, and Dad grew up on the ranch, went to Atkinson Senior High School. He used to talk about riding his pony to school. He went to American University for a couple of years, and then went into the Navy, served in the South Pacific, and when he came back, he went to work in Sioux City for a radio station, and that's where he met my mom.
My grandmother used to describe him as he was never a child. He just always was kind of this small adult. So always kind of that serious-minded, really dedicated to whatever he was doing. He was really involved in like speech and acting things in high school. So he always kind of had this interest in being in some sort of public eye. But he was still a rancher, a cowboy at heart. Over the years, it was interesting, being his daughter growing up, because I'm basically the same age as the broadcasting industry. When we were young, we knew what Dad did, and we're very aware that he was well known, being on the radio and the TV.
To call a news person a professional is the ultimate accolade, and I would call Grant Price a true professional.
Grant was a fixture on the Iowa news front, first at KTRI in Sioux City, then KXAL in Waterloo, WMT in Cedar Rapids, and KWWL in Waterloo.
I first began with the WMT stations as a member of the farm staff. Grant's responsibilities there included supervising, in all, probably about 30 people as the director of news services. Grant set the standard for being committed to reporting news, reporting it accurately, and being first and accurate.
He knew where we were headed, and he took us in the right direction and turned this into a powerhouse news operation. Just amazing.
If we're anything at all, it's probably because of Grant Price.
And it was all because of what he started here after coming from Channel 2, which in those days was WMT.
As we were growing up in Cedar Rapids, we had a sort of console TV, and then on top of that was another smaller TV. And he had, that would have been WMT at that time. That was on the big TV. And then whoever was his nearest competitor, that was on the TV on top. And the sound was off on that, but he was watching that both when we would have dinner almost every night.
But what really drove him into the arms of KWWL was when the guys at WMT said, well, we don't think we want to be as serious about doing news, and people want more soft news. And that was the kind of thing that drove Grant out and really made him susceptible to an offer from KWWL.
The words of the First Amendment ring true in the KWWL newsroom because of Grant Price, and tremendous emphasis he placed on the rights of the people, which include the rights of the journalists. We need to take a look at all viewpoints and all possible angles to determine if the story really is what we think it is, and then tell the people what that story is.
He cared more about what was true than what would get ratings. He would do the hard work, the research, the interviews, the vetting before he would put it out where it was for public consumption.
One of the things that made Grant so special is that Grant was not a proponent of what I call golden retriever journalism, which is, oh look, there's a moving object, let's go chase that. which so defines journalism today.
When people tuned in to us, they knew they were going to get the truth. He raised us from wherever we were to #1 because of the people that he hired. He trusted them to go out and do their jobs.
He realized that he had huge power in his hands in those days, and he wanted to make sure that the station used it well. And at the end of the day, he wanted to do the right thing. But what he wouldn't do was compromise those basic principles of get it right, tell the truth, and don't rush to be first, rush to be right.
Grant understood that from the very beginning, and look at the success that he brought to the station.
He was my very first boss in broadcasting, and wow, was that a treat. I think he was one of very few news directors who was well ahead of his time about recognizing diversity not only in the workplace, but in the people that we would interview. He went way out of his way to make sure that he would attract resumes from people of every race, creed, and color.
We were the first ones in this market to have a male and female co-anchor. He really admired Liz as a journalist.
One afternoon, I had to do an MOS, a man on the street. And I went to the mall, and I was interviewing people at the mall about this specific topic. And I came back into the newsroom, and Grant said, "Hey, Mathis, let me take a look at your video." And so he watched some of the video, and he said, "You know that our community is 20% African American?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Where is the diversity in your interviews?" That was my first lesson in diversity. And he was well ahead of his time with that.
Yeah, you know, especially young African Americans didn't get a lot of opportunities in this business, especially back then in the 70s and 80s. I'm still doing it after 31 years, after getting that opportunity from him, because he saw something in me. I don't know what he saw, but he saw that, you know, I'm forever grateful to him. I mean, he made my life, to be honest with you.
In the 1970s, he was on the forefront of arguing on behalf of all TV stations and all radio stations in Iowa that courtrooms need to be opened up to the public. And he was on the forefront of bringing that to Iowa, and he was at the cornerstone of the first case when they allowed cameras in courtrooms.
KWWL, because of Grant, we covered the very first trial ever covered in the state of Iowa. It was a double murder case involving a defendant named Michael Moses, the son of a prominent Waterloo dentist.
So much of our job in television is taking people where they don't normally get to go, or they just don't normally go, exposing people. But having cameras in the courtroom brings you in there and allows that visibility that provides openness, it provides accountability, and it provides just information that we wouldn't normally get without being there. So if it wasn't for Grant's work opening the courtrooms to cameras, I don't know where we'd be. Here in the state of Iowa, we've been on the forefront, and we've been on the forefront in Iowa because Grant was on the forefront.
If we want to get better as a community, if we want a better state, then we need people who know more about how it operates. And what could be more essential to that than seeing how the legal process operates inside the courtroom? So he fought to get that done, and he did.
One of Grant's most famous moments in his professional on-air career or news career was when Richard Nixon came to Iowa, and Grant got to ask a question of President Nixon.
What assurance do the farmers have that their super output will not lead to a disastrous break in farm prices, as in fact has already occurred in the beef feeding industry?
Well, first let me say that despite what is called a disastrous break in farm prices, the farmers have never had it so good.
It was the soundbite that almost every network news carried that night, was a question from Grant Price out of Waterloo, Iowa.
You know, I think he always just set an example for integrity. Always leave your best out there and treat people well. If he believed in you, he was behind you all the way. And the loyalty that he had for, I think, all the people in his life, but especially his family, I think really is something to aspire to.
When Phaedra, his wife, would come on campus, every door he'd open for her. He held hands with his wife, going down the skywalks. He just treated her like a queen.
News is tough on hours, but I know that Phaedra really cared about where he went. But he cared about, how your audition was, and are you able to spend time with them? Because this career can eat you up if you let it.
And those were the types of things that were not part of any lesson plan, but they were a way that we could learn from him on how to live life. He loved Phaedra. He loved his kids and would tell us about it. And we knew he loved us, too.
I think you'll get a lot of people describing who he was as a professional. My thing was, he was always our family historian. He always had some sort of a camera in his hand, always recording family events, birthdays, and then when the kids came along, their activities and things. So there, kind of that reporter in him was always capturing our lives.
He truly believed in community. And that's one of the reasons why he was big on doing the state archives. He was a true journalist.
I think the personal legacy is that he cared so much about people, he gave so much of himself. He ended his profession in a wonderful way, being an instructor, because he had so much information to share, so much experience, that what better way could he have to share that with future journalists?
Grant was my #1 professor and advisor and cheerleader for those 4 years when I was at Wartburg. But then beyond that, he was just kind of the moral and journalistic compass that I still check myself on every day.
And his name being on the studio here at Wartburg and on the archives of Iowa Broadcasting, his impact there, it just is this wonderful tie-in between the history of broadcasting and the future of where it's going. And for me, Grant Price sits at the juncture of those two things.
That's the reason that we're talking about him today, is because he was very much interested in carrying the baton as long as he could, and then making sure that he passed it off to younger, stronger runners and taught them.
The arc of my career has changed a lot, but it's just rooted in the things that he taught me there at Wartburg. That wasn't just a job, it was a passion, because he had every right to retire after his journalism career. He chose to invest in our lives and then invest in the college, and I'm the recipient of that blessing every day.
Look at the tremendous donation, $2 million, that he gave to Wartburg College. Grant Price's generosity and dedication to a profession that he truly believed in speaks for itself.
He planted a seed in all of us that even goes beyond what we do for a living. You know, Grant came into my life at the right time. He helped me bring out the best in myself. He challenged me, and that's what I really appreciated about him. He helped me live a dream.
He was the leader and the pioneer in so many things of setting up a way of how we do things, even here in the state of Iowa and across the country, that his influence is still being felt.
He was such a good friend, a good mentor, and a good person. I didn't really have a grandfather, and so I always kind of thought of him as one of those. And I'd love to be talking to him, just about anything.
My son Grant is now 8 years old, and there's no mistake of why he has the name Grant. Because I hope that someday my Grant will be as strong as Grant Price, to be a leader, to be a rock among the people he's around. I hope my Grant is an influence on people around him he doesn't have to be. I hope my Grant never wavers in what's important to him. There are life habits that I hope my Grant emulates exactly what Grant Price meant to me.
This noon's broadcast marks the last time I'll be doing the 12:15 news on KXEL. If you can forgive a reporter for making a story about himself, we'd like to take a moment to express our appreciation for the many rewarding experiences we've been privileged to share over the years. I'm leaving KXEL to take another position in news broadcasting. I'm happy to say that we will not be leaving eastern Iowa. During my tenure as news director at KXEL, it has been my privilege to work with some of the finest people in the broadcasting business. It would be impossible to even recall all of the wonderful courtesies and assistance which have been extended to us by the people with whom we have dealt as news sources, but they have not gone unappreciated.